brief introduction of myself. I'm Will Llewellyn. I'm the consultant helping the West Hills District with the search for the next president of West Hills College Lemoore. And so we welcome you to this forum for the finalists for the president position. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm one of you. And by that I mean I worked in the West Hills Community College District earlier in my career, and everybody has masks on, and so I know there's some familiar faces out there, but might not be recognizing you. I was the president at the Coalinga campus for 5 years. And so I spent a lot of time here, had a lot of meetings here, a lot of events, and all of that, and had a lot of friends here as well, including President Don Workentine, who was a dear friend of mine. And I was fortunate enough to be able to come back and held the event here at the campus for him, the memorial event, the celebration of his life. And so after I left the Coalinga campus, I went to the Hartnell Community College District and spent the last 7 years of my career there, and then I retired in 2019. Well, not really. I retired from that job, because here I am, still working for some reason. Actually, I really enjoy this. It's part-time, and how fortunate that I ended up getting to do this work with you all here and kind of coming home. So it's been great coming back to the campus and seeing folks that I knew, at that time. So a little bit about the process today. I'm going to bring up the candidate here in a second, and I will let him introduce himself as part of his opening remarks. So I'm not going to spend any time on his background, and of course you got the bios and stuff, I think, on your website and that. And then Mr. Preston will have, he's got 2 questions that are prepared questions ahead of time that he is going to respond to. I'll read them, and then he has an opportunity to provide a response to those prepared questions. And then from there, we'll open it up to your questions. So again, feel free to take one of those cards, and if you have something you'd like to ask, please do that. We welcome those questions. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming James Preston.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see all of you. Kind of a strange setting with everybody in mask, but just super grateful to be here today. If I haven't met you, I'm James Preston. I'm currently the interim president here at West Hills College Lemoore. And I'm going to start off with 3 minutes, a little bit of education experience, how it relates to this position. So some of you know, some of you don't, but I was born in just outside of Liverpool, England. And I came over to Fresno, California when I was 10 years old. So immigrated here from England, came to the Central Valley, and I've been here for the last 41 years. Don't do the math on that, please. Went to UC Santa Barbara, where I got my bachelor's degree in English. And was super immersed in literature, music, and sports, and had absolutely no clue after I got my bachelor's degree what I wanted to be when I grew up. At the time, I was dating my now wife. Actually, she was my fiance at the time, and she was in the credential program at Preston Pacific University. And I saw in her a path of purpose, and she was going into a career where she wanted to make a difference, and that made a light bulb go off in my head and started that same journey. So I got my single subject credential at Fresno Pacific University and my master's degree in education with an emphasis in curriculum and teaching. So that was the educational side, the beginning of my 27 years now in education. And the first 17 years were in the classroom, and I loved it. I went in to make a difference. I started off at Mendota High School. So I was a high school teacher for 6 years, taught English, coached basketball, taught creative writing. 4 of those years at Mendota High School out on the west side were really foundational and I would say life-changing for me. I was surrounded by passionate educators who loved education. I was surrounded by passionate leaders who really impacted me, and I learned about the challenges of a small rural community. I learned about the challenges of poverty for our students. I learned about Hispanic culture deeply for the first time in my life, and learned about family and focus and resilience and respect, and it changed me as a person. I had the opportunity in 2000 to apply for a position with West Hills Community College District, and that started my 11 years of teaching at the community college level. So first couple years I was in North District Center, Coalinga, and Lemoore, and then eventually full-time in Lemoore starting in 2003, and taught English and education classes. My goal in the classroom for 11 years, community college and 6 in high school, was just to be a passionate teacher. What I mean by that is having passion for student success, but also having passion for the subject matter. And English and education, working with future teachers, were the subject matter. I also had the opportunity to do a number of leadership things as a faculty member. So I was the Academic Senate President for a couple of years from 2008 to 2010. Helped me to learn a lot about district and shared governance. I was on Accreditation co-chair. Started 2 programs on our campus back in the day. Team Teach, which is a program we have for future teachers, so I got to start that in 2006. And then also the 5C Experience, which is a summer outreach program for middle school students. So as a faculty member, I was able to work with grants and do some additional leadership opportunities. That led to 10 years ago, where I was offered a position as an interim dean, and I didn't know if I wanted to take the step and go into administration because I love the classroom, but the common denominator for me was, in any job I'm in, can I make a difference? And that 9 months in the interim dean position made me realize that as an administrator, as a leader, that I can make a difference. And so that journey began. I spent 5 years as a dean of educational services here at our college, where I learned about scheduling, staffing, evaluations, professional development, career technical education programs, program review, and a handful of other things. In 2017, I was fortunate enough to become the vice president of instruction. And so in that job, I learned a lot about accreditation as the accreditation liaison officer, learned a lot about the curriculum as a co-chair for the curriculum committee, a lot about systems and budget, and started to work quite a bit with our district office. And then the last 6 months, I've had the privilege to be our interim president here at West Hills College Lemoore. Something again that I wasn't sure I was ready for, but realized right when I got into the position, not only was I ready for it, but I got really excited about it. And I've had the opportunity to just learn a ton. 5 main goals have been to return to campus, our enrollment marathon, strategic planning, fiscal and facilities, and getting our Golden Eagle mojo back, just by getting back on campus and having a campus community come alive again. And it's been an honor to be able to do that the last 5 months to today. So each stage of my journey has prepared me for this current stage, and my current stage of life, I think, will allow me to do a good job as the next president. My wife and I have 3 kids, and I guess they're adult children now, but the youngest just left for college. So we have an empty nest, which gives me a little bit more time to hang out and be present in the Eagle's nest. So that's a little bit about my background.
Thank you, Mr. Preston. The first question we have is, what do you see as the major enrollment and financial challenges and opportunities that West Hills College Lemoore will face now and in the near future? And how will you ensure the college's success in light of these challenges and opportunities?
Thanks, Dr. Willem. So what I know about West Hills College Lemoore is challenges for us are really opportunities. It's the way that we've always been. It's in our fabric, it's in our DNA. This is a college that, when the world changed in March 2020, we flipped to remote instruction and remote services over a weekend. And we didn't just do it, we did it well. We came up with innovative teaching practices, we maintained our success rates. At the end of last year, despite being remote, we had the same number of degrees and certificates conferred to our students because we care about our students. On the budget side, we faced 2 years of furloughs because of the failed implementation of the student-centered funding formula, which is a phrase that we heard quite a bit. Yet we do what we do. Our formula here as Golden Eagles is we innovate, we work as a team, we're flexible, and we always put students first. I'm excited to have a couple of our students here in the audience today, so I appreciate them being here. On the enrollment side, so the question was enrollment challenges and budget challenges. So on the enrollment side, First of all, we need to emphasize our strengths to build enrollment back and some of the challenges we have. So for us, that's being flexible and unique. So flexible meaning we have online classes, hybrid, face-to-face. We have flexible services and flexible spaces for our students. What makes us unique is that we're small. We know our students by name. We have open educational resources. We've got CTE certificates that help students get jobs in industry. We transfer our students. There's a lot of things that make us unique here. Our current situation is this when it comes to enrollment. So we're currently, as of today, we're at 74% of our target. And normally at this time of the year, we're probably closer to 85 or 90%. And last fall, we were down 17% in enrollment, which was pretty standard. The community college districts in the fall of 2020, because of the pandemic, were down somewhere between 10 and 25. We were down 17. And this fall, we remained down 17. But what we've realized in the last month or so is a lot of colleges were not only down, but then this fall they were down and then down again, whereas we've plateaued. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'll get into a few of them right now real quick, but what do we need to do to build back enrollment? I've got 4 things. Number 1, engage our current students. And so we've realized through a series of events and activities that we needed to be on campus, and we've been 70% in person this fall, which is much higher than most because we were able to do it safely. We started an event this summer called Live Reg Fest, where students could come in one night and they could apply for the college, they could get financial aid, they could register for classes. And what we realized is they just wanted a human being to interact with because they've been remote. So Nestor, our Director of Admissions Records, sends out a text on Monday for a Tuesday event, and we're expecting 10 people, we have 50. And then we do it again, we have 75, and we do it again, we have 125. So we realized students wanted to be here in person. This fall, being back, close to 3 times as many appointments for students compared to fall of 20. And it wasn't because people weren't working hard, it was just because there was so much noise. When you're remote, everything's electronic and it's hard to break through. So our students know we're here. Secondly, reconnecting with our high school partners. So our admin teams just finished today a tour of 11 high schools in our region to connect with the admin teams and hear their stories and hear how we can support them. We hired a director of outreach and recruitment, which is a position we've never had before, and she has a team, and she'll have an office here in the Golden Eagle Arena pretty soon too, to specifically recruit students. And where we are already, if you think of the recruiting cycle from October to when we opened registration in April, right? So April of 2021, we had only 550 students that even filled out an application. As of November 15th, which is about a month into this recruitment cycle, we're already at 650. And why? Because we're out there, right? We're out there in the schools, we're engaging with our community. Third, engage industry. So we're hiring a director of apprenticeship. Chris Costa has done an amazing job and our faculty with our advisory committees and having industry present. And then engaging our community. And so a lot to do there with the HOPE initiative, where we hope to serve underserved students, KCAO, a number of different community partnerships that we've done. On the financial side, well, we've done it. We've been through furloughs twice. We've been through budget cuts a bunch of times. And what I know is, number 1, every time we get into that situation, we look to be more efficient. We work with our district office. We're transparent. We communicate. We roll up our sleeves. We streamline. We work together as a team to do everything that we can. We need to look at, in terms of enrollment and financial, because they go hand in hand, diversifying our enrollment. So there's opportunities at our college. We can do a lot more with dual enrollment, so having high school students take college classes, apprenticeships, where people are working in the field and getting credit while they do it. And we do have a really strong online program. And then finally, on the financial side, diversifying our funding. So where we have a lot of federal grants for OER, Upward Bound, National Science Foundation, a lot of categorical grants and programs that the state provides, we can't just depend on Sacramento alone, which is something that our originator, Dr. Frank Gornick, said back in the day when he started off Kalinga College, that we've got to do other things. So for us, that's a lot of grant writing. It's also partnerships. Most recently for us, we've had some conversations with the Santa Rosa Rancheria foundations. So Mackenzie Scott gave us a great gift that's going to help us launch our HOPE initiative. We're in the Aspen Institute 150. So these are philanthropic foundations. Other partners, Kings County Action Organization. So a variety of ways to diversify our funding as we go forward. So those are just a couple things on the enrollment side and the financial side to try and get us through these challenging times.
provide an example from your background where you provided leadership for the improvement of success of a diverse student population. What were the student success outcomes of the effort?
Good, thank you for that one too. So at our college, diversity is our strength. We are diverse. We're a Hispanic serving institution. We're 60% Hispanic, Latinx, about 30% Caucasian, usually about 6 to 8% African American, anywhere from 3 to 5% Native American, Asian American. And we've had multiple examples of improving our diverse population success outcomes. But the question says, what's your leadership style? What have you done to lead? And I kind of need to explain that first before I talk about the initiatives, because it's not all just about the person. It's not about just the leader. So my leadership style is a couple things. The first one, my style is to listen first, learn from everybody, and then lead in that order. Right? You have to listen to the people that you're working with, learn from them, and then from there, you can lead. Secondly, I'm a big proponent of what I call kitchen table conversations. And so oftentimes you hear about community colleges have student services side of the house and ed services side of the house, two different divisions. And we're small enough where we're not different houses, we're different rooms. We have two different operations. We can hear each other in the other room oftentimes, right? But whenever it comes to a really big initiative on campus, we have what I call kitchen table conversations. So it's coming to the kitchen table, having some dialogue, talking about what we need to do. I don't know about your house, but that's the way things get done in our house with 3 kids, right? It's 20 minutes at dinner time. Everybody's flying in. We talk about our days. What are you doing next? Off you're going, ready, go, right? It's kind of the same thing with our college. So these kitchen table conversations. And we've also learned to look at data, and that's really been key for us. I think we've matured a lot in learning how to look at data, not just see it, but understand what to do with it once we do see it. So that's the common denominator. That's my leadership style. And then once we get going on an initiative, my job really is a coach. And so I coached for years. As a coach, I encourage, I support, I help strategize with others, and then communicate. Right? So that's kind of foundationally the leadership. And I'll share a couple of examples. And I want to emphasize these are team numbers, and that's why I'm going to humble brag about them, because they're Golden Eagle team numbers that all of us contributed to, right? So the first one I would say on a larger scale, a student success initiative that improved for our diverse student body is Guided Pathways. And so you hear that in a very general term all the time, but Guided Pathways for us really started 5 or 6 years ago, getting a team together of a counselor, a faculty member, an administrator for a discipline. So let's say psychology, for example, right? And sitting down and saying, what does it take to get for a student that's starting as a psych major to a transfer degree in 2 years, and mapping that out. And that's what we went about. We did that for all of our 2-year degrees. We did it for all our 1-year certificates. We put all of those pathways in the catalog. We made those pathways into education plans. We scheduled around those pathways, and because we have Bridge 365 where you can register for classes year-round, you could really put their student in that full first year. The result, I said you always look at data. So the result, if you look at our data 5 years ago compared to now, we almost doubled the amount of degrees and certificates that we confer at the end of each year. So instead of 600 students 5 years ago walking across the stage in this building in May, which I'm really excited about this year and every year, we have about 1,200. So literally doubled, right? But it's because we were strategic and had pathways. Another example, kind of a medium-sized example, was AB 705. So this is legislation that basically required that students no longer had to take placement tests, but instead they could be placed into classes, English and math classes, based on multiple measures, and predominantly their GPA from high school. And also, they would go straight into transfer level or transfer level with support. So sometimes if someone had a bad placement test, they might end up 3 or 4 English classes before they took, quote unquote, their real English class. Right? So AB 705 got rid of all of that, and it was great teamwork for curriculum design. What will support look like? Working with student services to make sure students are placed in the right classes. What that resulted in, again, look at the data. This is data from 2019, but in English, before AB 705, our throughput was 46%. So that's about 1 in every 2 students would complete transfer level English within their first year, right? After we implemented, it was 66%. Right, so 46 to 66. Our Hispanic and white students went from 48% to 63% throughput, very similar. African American students went from 37% to 64%. On the math side, same concept, a lot of redesign, a lot of support built in. We went from 19%, so think of that, 19% is maybe 2 out of 10, so like 1 out of 5 students within the first year completed transfer level math, to 57%, right? So that's 1 and 2. So from 1 and 5 to 1 and 2. Not quite for the super mathy folks in here, I'm averaging, getting close, estimating, right? Our Hispanic students, 16% to 52%. Our African American students, 4% to 41%. Right? So the data is what we look at the beginning, and the data is what we look at the end. But in between, and to get there, we have the kitchen table conversations, work together. So that's just a couple of examples of things that we've done. I actually have a list of a lot more, but I'm down to 5 minutes, so I think my time's up on that one, Dr. Llewellyn.
Okay, now we'll get to some questions from our participants here today. How has the hold harmless of the student-centered funding formula hurt smaller institutions like West Hills Lemoore? What does the state need to do to end that?
That's a great question.
Just wave a magic wand.
Yeah, I said we didn't want to depend on Sacramento. So to provide context, especially to our students, to kind of understand the question of what hold harmless might be. So if as a school district, or this community college district, that is not growing, if you're previously you get funded based on your enrollment. So if your enrollment goes up, then your funding goes up, right? But there's something in place called a hold harmless, where if your enrollment stays the same or goes down, you can call hold harmless basically, and then you still get the same amount of funding, even though you might be declining in enrollment. Well, a handful of years ago, a new funding formula came out, student-centered funding formula, that's different than just basing it on the number of students that show up. It was basing it on the number of students that showed up, but more importantly, how many of them succeeded. So basically the formula broke down, it was 60% of enrollment instead of 100%, and then success metrics, so how many of your students transferred, how many completed transfer level English and math within the first year, how many got placed into jobs, right? Different success metrics for students. And then there was an element there too with socioeconomic equity factors. So everybody called it focus on the 40, right? Because 60% was enrollment and the 40% really represented student success. And we kind of laughed at that a little bit because that's no different than what we normally do. It's what we show up for every morning. We should always be focusing on the 40. Right? Our mission is literally the relentless pursuit of student success, not the relentless pursuit of the 40%, right? And so we knew that because of what I shared earlier, we doubled in degrees, we had better throughput, that funding formula was going to help us, right? And it did. If you looked at when it first came out, we were in the top, I think there's 70-something districts, 115 or so community colleges. We were in the top 10% in terms of the increase. We were slated to get about a 15 to 18% funding increase, right? So we got that, we're all excited, we're 10 months out of the year in our 12-month fiscal year, and we get the news that they're not going to fully fund the new funding formula, right? And so that put us in a bit of a tough situation. So not fair, right? Called foul, threw the flag, right? But none of that mattered because ultimately Sacramento said that's the situation. So we did what we do. We looked at the budget situation, we made changes, we adapted, and we kept students at the forefront. How would I fix it? Is that the second part of the question?
Yeah, what does the state need to do? I guess, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, I would love to them just to keep their promise. Yeah, I guess I would say that. If you're going to put out a funding formula, and then you tell everybody what they're going to get, then go ahead and give those colleges that work to do that effectively, make sure that you fund them at those levels. But like I said earlier, we know we can't depend on that, so that's where work with foundations, work with grants, we figure it out when they're not dependable.
What is your vision and expectations of athletics on this campus, and how would you create an environment that supports student athletes and athletics on campus?
Yeah, so I think we're just beginning. I'm pretty excited about what's been going on. I've been thinking a lot about our student athletes this week. I'm praying for our student athletes this week, especially our men's basketball team. They've had a tragic loss, but they've inspired me even prior to the challenges of the last few weeks, because we have numbers in athletics right now that we haven't seen in a while. And I think, we always talk about the silver linings of the COVID cloud, and I think one of those is people realize, some basic things that we maybe don't appreciate as much as we normally would, like interaction with our coworkers and seeing students on campus. And I know for a lot of young people, athletics, right, sports, and not being able to do that on a regular basis. And so the vision really started with our previous president, Don Workentine, and a lot of it's in this building. This building is amazing. This building will host the 2022 state championships for basketball. And we'll, as a Lemoore community, be really proud to host people. We were supposed to do it in 2020. And if you watch Netflix, you'll even see, an episode where Fidel is, rolling balls off the court. And that was a hard day, because it was a day we wanted to celebrate. But we have a good history with men's and women's soccer. And I know that that's going to continue to grow. Roster numbers were great this year. Our women's volleyball team, pretty new and starting to emerge. Our wrestling team, as you can see, has had a ton of success. Women's basketball, historically, a ton of success, thanks to athletes like Alejandra. And our men's basketball, and they're having a great start to their season. Our men's basketball team is built different this year. Very new program, a couple of years for us to get together. We've got an incredible coach, incredible group of young men that represent themselves really well on campus. And I think that's just the beginning. So when we talked earlier about enrollment, right, that's one way to diversify your enrollment. So we're already having some conversations about what additional sports would work here in Lemoore. I've got people advocating and lobbying for lots of different kinds, but we have a wonderful athletic director who's already kind of researching and talking. I think ultimately, when it comes to athletics, we just need to remember that it's student athlete, not athlete student. Right? So at the end of the day, the majority of our student athletes aren't going to be doing that for a living. But while they're here, we can do whatever we can to provide them with a great education and then help them get to the next level. And for many of them, that's a 4-year university, and ultimately to a degree. So we do a lot of things with academic support. We do a lot of things with case management like we do with our other students. We have counseling advising available to them, really strong support team. And I do want to give a shout out to athletics, because it's been hard upon hard, right? These guys are testing weekly, they're testing before games. Our athletic staff is just doing a ton. So I think we've had a good history. I think it just got better this year, and I think it's about to get great in the near future.
What do you hope to achieve in the first year should you be the next president?
I think the 5 goals that I had for the last 6 months for us as a college will be similar. I think they're kind of the foundation. So I talked earlier about that. So the first goal was to return to campus safely, which was important, because if we don't have safety in place for our students and for our employees, and we can't do what we do. And we do it really well when we're on campus. And not that we don't have great online classes and great online services, we do. But we do something pretty special on our campus. So maintaining our presence on campus as we're able to, and maintaining those health and safety measures. Secondly, I think in a year from now, I would hope that our enrollment is back to where it was, and that we have students re-engaged and coming back to campus, that we're more engaged with our community partners, our high school partners. I would say in the first 100 days, when it comes to fiscal and facilities, which is my third goal, I would say fiscally that hopefully we're where we are right now, because we're actually on pretty solid ground. We've had quite a bit of additional federal funding that's helped us do things. Facilities-wise, I envision a year from now that all of our classrooms will be high-flex classrooms, and 15 of those will be done in January, we hope. So I'm excited about that. And so we'll also be working on, hopefully we'll be working on a campaign for a new building. So we've got a visual arts and applied sciences 2-story instructional building, been approved by the state, $32 million building, with health careers on the top floor and art and computer science on the bottom floor. So 32 million, and the state's already given us 24. So we only have to come up with 8. So that would be my hope in the first year, is that we can come up with the other 8 and move forward with that building and those programs, because I think they're much needed. Golden Eagle Mojo is what I call it, oftentimes in my top 5, and that's really getting back to campus and our campus community, but also getting out into the community. So we have a Hope initiative that we'll be launching with our new Hope director. That's really, we're going to be reaching out to underserved populations, just working with a variety of community organizations, and just let them know that West Hills College Lemoore is a community college, right? It's a college for the community, and so we need to engage the community. So building like this, you know, it's great to be able to host CIF volleyball championships and marching band competitions and provide a space for people in the community to come and share. And then building it back on campus with our employees. So the last few months, we've had some, you know, each month we try to do one event. And so we had our Halloween throwdown in October and had some pizza. And, you know, last month we had Thanksgiving, but we're doing it outdoors, socially distanced with, well, we're outdoors, so we don't have masks on, but, you know, it's very different. It'd be nice to get back to doing a little bit more of that in maybe not so different way. So again, the things that I'm really focusing in on now, I think I'll be focusing in on going forward, but just to a different degree.
What sort of programs or student services are you looking to build more into in the next few years?
Yeah, I think programs, obviously we'll always look to add more transfer programs for our students, because that was kind of our bread and butter. So when we grew up, right, we started in 2003 as a college, and I'd say for the first decade, we were pretty much a transfer unit college. That's like all we did, was really just prepare students to transfer. And within the last 5 or 6 years, we've started to grow our career technical education programs and then support for our students to get them workforce ready. So we have the WIN Center, a workforce internship networking center to get students ready for the workforce. So part of that is really looking at labor market data and seeing what the trends are coming, right? Because it's nice to build a program because someone likes construction, for example, but if we look at the labor market data and it shows that it's declining, which it's not, so this is a bad example, but if we looked at the labor market data and it was declining and we just built it because someone likes it, then we're not serving our students, right? So we want to look at the labor market, we want to see what emerging jobs are coming out, and then build and design programs around that. So an example recently, our industrial automation program, Chris Costa under her leadership, through strong workforce funding, we've been able to start to build a program that we know there's a huge need in terms of being able to place students into jobs. So I think CTE, career tech ed programs based on labor market needs, transfer programs, but we want to constantly look at the way that we approach teaching and learning, and we want to be innovative and engage students, and that's going to look different. It's going to look different from year to year, right? Coming out of the pandemic, teaching in the classroom looks very different than it did before we went in. So that's not just having high-flex classrooms with the technology, but that's flexible furniture, that's flipping the classroom so it's more project-based, hands-on. Right? So even within those degree programs, we're preparing people. And then in terms of services, I think we've learned some great lessons. And so I think, you know, I was talking with Val, our VP, about the fact that now our students are accessing, when it comes to support services, financial aid, counseling, other things, about 50% of them are coming in person, but maybe 25% of those appointments are via Zoom, and then 25% are just phone calls, right? Where before we always said, well, you have to come to the college, right? But if I'm working a job, and I have a 30-minute lunch break, and I need someone to help me with some financial aid, how cool is it that I can set a Zoom appointment and step out into the parking lot or into my car or break room and go take care of my financial aid. So we need to be more flexible in the services we provide going forward. So those would be the 3 things.
How do you address the issues of mental health with students? How do you support staff and even yourself when situations happen that can be triggering to mental well-being?
That's a great question. Mental health is something that we don't talk about enough. So all the time, we talk about our physical health, you know, are we working out, what are we eating? Everyone's happy to have that conversation. We're not happy to have the conversation, but we have the conversation. And mental health, unfortunately, has had a stigma put on it for so many years that people are oftentimes fearful of talking about it. So what we need to do as a college is to continue what we've been doing, which is really having those conversations, providing services. We have the draw program, so if a student has some mental health challenges, they have a program, they have counseling available to them. As staff employees, we need to look out for students, which was really hard to do in the pandemic. If I have a student in a classroom that over a course of weeks has gone from vibrant and engaged to totally disconnected, and they're sitting in my classroom, I can see that, right? Or if Eva's working with them in EOPS and they come to one counseling appointment, then they come to the next one, and they're two totally different attitudes when they come, that kind of raises some awareness for us. That was really hard to do when we were remote, because we couldn't see our students. In fact, our draw referrals for mental health were actually down, but I don't think it was because people weren't struggling. I think it's because we couldn't see our students, and we couldn't see each other. And so again, looking at data now, just in the last month, in October, we had more draw referrals than we've had in a long time. Because people are struggling. It's hard to be remote, and then it's hard to come back. And COVID, we've talked about the silver linings, we've talked about the innovation, we've talked about all the positives that we've tried to pull out of it. It's been really, really hard on a lot of people. A lot of loss, a lot of tragedy, a lot of struggle. When I think about our students during the pandemic, I think about multi-person households, right, with a couple of family members going out to the service industry, to the fields, because they have to pay the bills, and it was just difficult. Personally, for me, it's something that's close to my heart. I have a sister that has struggled and continues to struggle with mental health for 2 decades now, and so it's been a lot of conversations and it's been a lot. And then for me personally, I think people have to have that conversation and figure out what works for them to find that balance mental health wise. So for some that's exercise, for some that's conversation, for some that's connecting with others, for some that's checking out, for some that's prayer, right? So whatever it is for you, I'd like to be able to do that. But again, I think mental health is something we need to talk more about, and we need to rip the stigma part out of it and just kind of normalize it, for lack of a better word, like we do our physical health. Let's just have the conversation, help each other out.
What is your experience with accreditation?
That's an easy one. Okay, this is good. Kind of like it's anticipating the questions. Yeah, so let's say accreditation is my jam. So for the students again in here, so if we don't have accreditation, you have to go through a process every 7 years. And if we're not an accredited institution, the degrees or certificates we give you, that paper doesn't count anywhere, right? So if we don't have accreditation, we don't have a purpose for being here, right? And so for me, it's kind of been a history. I would say, when I was a faculty member, I was a co-chair for one of the standards for Standard 2. I was on a couple of visiting teams to go visit other colleges that were getting accredited. In 2017, which was our last full accreditation, I was part of the writing team, and then our accreditation liaison officer, who leads all the accreditation efforts on campus, or the ALO, our accreditation liaison officer retired in December when we had a visit in March. But he's a good man, and I still talk to him. I don't hold it against him, because he felt very confident about the self-study that we had put together, right, which is about a 400-page document with evidence. And he told me, he's like, you're good, you got it, and we did, we had it. And so things went well. We had a good visit in 2017, but I was the ALO for that visit, so that meant organizing and planning and getting interviews set up. And when the accrediting team said, we need to see evidence of this, we don't have it, I had to go find it. Obviously, team approach all the way along. After that, we had to do a follow-up report. I'm addressing one of our recommendations. Since then, I have lead a team that wrote the midterm. And then most recently did some training for the new format for accreditation with ACCJC. We're just kicking off that process for us, which is to have our self-study done by August of 2023, and then a visit in the spring of 24. So we're about to launch into accreditation season in January, which I'm excited about. So outside of that, we have to submit an annual report to accreditation, so that's something that I'm also responsible for in my role as accreditation liaison officer. But again, really important, and it's a good process. It shouldn't just be an event. It happens every 7 years. It should be something that's ongoing. We should always be looking at ourselves. It's really about continuous quality improvement, which is, again, what we do anyway, because we built that into kind of the fabric of our college.
Provide an example from your experience of how you've used participatory governance or shared governance, collegial governance, whatever word you want to put on it, to help inform a decision.
Yeah, so again, we're a unique system in community college. So I came from K-12. That was where I spent my first 6 years, so it was not participatory governance. Right, so in K-12, slightly participatory, but it's not, legally it's not participatory. Oftentimes the administration comes up with something and then we work together to enforce it. So participatory governance is really working with our academic senate, it's working with our student government, it's working with CSEA to make joint decisions. Probably the freshest one in my mind, because it happens all the time in everything we do, and if you, our main decision body on campus, and this speaks a lot to participatory governance, is our Planning and Governance Council, or PGC. And we meet every 2 weeks, and board policies and administrative procedures and resolutions come through that body, and that body has 8 votes. So we have 2 students, 2 classified, 2 faculty, 2 administrators. Everybody has an equal vote on things that come through their program reviews and other things, right? And then if there's a tie, then the president gets the tie-breaking vote. So that's the best example that we have, is our committee that we have. A most recent example, the conversation that's been going on for a decade, is what was our rule of 7. And so we have a sister college, West Hills College Coalinga, and ourselves. And we had 7 things within our classes that we had to have in common: course title, units, prefix, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of conversation about, does that stay a rule of 7, or does it become a rule of 5? And reduce a couple of those, or a rule of 3, or a rule of 0. So we had a lot of dialogue, both at PGC, between our academic senates, got a lot of input from everybody, and it was a long conversation that had a lot of people involved and came to a good resolution. So we have going forward, we have a new rule, but it's one that everybody agreed to and everybody had input on.
I know you talked a little bit about facilities earlier in the questions, I think related to one of the other questions, but this one is specifically, what is your experience with facilities construction projects?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I remember when I started as the vice president in 2017, I was asked, what are my biggest weaknesses or areas of growth, is the nice way of saying weaknesses. So at that time for me, it was fiscal, which is budget, and it was facilities, because I just hadn't had a lot of experience in either of those. And I would say in both those areas, the last 4 or 5 years, I've learned a lot on the budget side. On the facility side, I'd say specifically in the last year, it's been an area that I've spent a lot of time and learned a lot, and I'm excited about. So really 2 things within the last year. I've watched a project, which I mentioned earlier, the Visual Arts and Applied Sciences building, which would be a 2-story building just north of here. Watched it go through the whole process. So watched the IPP, the FPP, all the different acronyms that go with it, right? All of these different plans that we have to submit to the state. Worked with architects, picked out designs, worked with faculty, set up classroom designs. I don't do the whole interior design thing, like Chris Costa has to be at that meeting, or former chancellor, or current chancellor, former president, Preston Clark, because I can't pick out colors. My wife had to pick out my suit today. So I didn't do that part, but everything else, working with the architects and that whole conversation and building program design. So that's something that was new to me, but within the last 12 months, and specifically the last 6 months, has been an area of growth and something that I've learned quite a bit about. The second facilities experience is that we have what's called HERF funding, which is higher education relief funding, to help us basically get through the pandemic. And so we did a number of things with that funding. It's a lot of money. It's multi-million dollars, right? So we bought all of the PPE that we could, the masks and the shields and all of that. We put in bipolar ionization in the filtration system, which makes me sound smart when I say it, but apparently it works really, really well. We got microfiber, which is like hospital grade cleaning in the classrooms. We did all of these different things, and we still had a few $1 million left. And our other funding went directly to students, right? So that student aid goes directly to students, but we had this pot of money, so we're like, okay, what can we do to improve the current facilities that we have? And so we're currently putting in these high-flex classrooms, and it's really tied back to health and safety, because we've got flexible furniture, which allows us to space out, and we make them Zoom capable so that we're flexible in our format. So if someone had to isolate for a couple weeks because they've been exposed to COVID, they can still Zoom into the class. If we got back into a tough spot with a new variant and we could only have 20 in a classroom, we could still have some students Zoom in, so that just makes it flexible. So that project to me seemed like, on paper, pretty straightforward, but I realized now that I understand facilities a little bit more, right? It meant contract bids, it meant working with vendors, it meant ripping out classroom furniture and working with M&O, it meant picking new furniture, it meant putting in AV, it meant electrical, it meant moving the strobe light and the fire alarm. All of these things, you become really a project manager. And so between the HyFlex project and the Visual Arts and Applied Sciences building, that's been my experience the last couple of years. It's helped me to learn in those areas. There's still a lot to learn, but I'm enjoying it.
Before we do this next question, I forgot to mention that we've got a form that we'd like you to fill out. I believe Becky has passed that around, so if you could take a few minutes and fill that out and collect it as part of this. As the president of West Hills Lemoore, how would you engage with the community?
Yeah, great question. So I think we've already started to do that. I think we have a good, strong tradition within the community and partners that we've worked with for a number of years, service organizations, outside entities like high schools that can do athletic events here, different types of things. But I think it's also an area that we could do a lot more. And more than just outreach and recruitment, more than just going out there and saying, hey, come to us and take classes. Right? How can we really be a good community partner? And so I've mentioned it a few times, but we're hiring a director of Hope in the next month or so. And just to kind of give a backstory on that. So Mackenzie Scott gave our college, she chose us. She chose 285 organizations in the United States, either nonprofits or educational organizations. And if you don't know who Mackenzie Scott is, she's the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos. And if you don't know who Jeff Bezos is, he's the owner of Amazon. Right, so she's made it her lifetime goal to give away the half that is hers to charitable organizations, nonprofits. So she chose us. She chose West Hills College Lemoore. Out of 285 entities, we were one of those. And so with that gift, we're going to be able to endow it. We have endowed it and hire a director of Hope. And the whole purpose of the Hope Project is to engage the community and provide support for the community. So I mentioned earlier, working with underserved populations, reaching out to foster youth. This last year, we were working with Kings County Office of Education. We brought an adult transition program for students between 18 and 22 with disabilities on campus. I met a couple weeks ago with the Boys and Girls Club. We've had a number of students that have gone through the Boys and Girls Club, and I talked with them, and they're like, we don't really have that much in our part of the valley, South Valley. We have bigs at Lemoore High School, which is like high school students to younger students, but we don't have a way to mentor, right? So I've had some conversations with them and what that would look like if we brought in South Valley. We've worked with Hannah's House, Samuel's House, which is a lot of students that are in either drug recovery or formerly incarcerated, reached out specifically to them. So just reaching out to our community, not just so that they can take our classes, but so we can support them, and then really open up our doors and be a place where we can celebrate things, celebrate heritage events. We've done that over the years, and it's something I'm hoping we'll get to do a lot more of going forward.
question, and then we're going to give Mr. Preston a chance for some concluding remarks. As the president of West Hills Lemoore, what ideas do you have for how you will engage directly with students?
Yeah, so that's a part I'm really excited about. I had a hard time, as many people did during the pandemic, not being on campus, because it's just not the same, right? I mean, probably all of us worked harder than ever. We're on a computer more than we'd ever been, put in longer hours than we'd ever had, but we didn't have students in front of us. And for me, that was hard, because I love engaging with students. In fact, as I talked about earlier, it was hard for me to leave the classroom because I had direct contact with students. And one of the things I love about this college, and one of the reasons why you won't see me apply for a presidential position or probably even a VP anywhere else, is the fact that we're small. And so even as a VP and as a dean and as a college president, I get to interact with students on a daily basis. And that fills my cup. That fills my cup. And so I'd like to do a lot more. I've got a ton of ideas that as interim I thought, well, if I get to do this permanently, these are things that I could do. And I think there's a number of different ways. I'd love to do more forums. I'd love to do more chats. Just have hours in the student union, open office hours for students to come in. I did have the opportunity last week. I meet regularly with our AXP president, but I had the opportunity last week to meet with all of our student government. And we talked about, I'm looking at Aaron, but we talked about doing that on a monthly basis to get their ideas and their input so they can kind of share ideas with me in terms of the college. I think I'm not a huge social media person. In fact, it's funny because in my personal life, I don't do social media because to me, it's the people that I want to talk with, I can text and I can go see and all that kind of stuff. But the social media that I do have, which is Twitter and Instagram, at JP to the PD, the reason I have them is really just to tell the story of our college, right? And then on Twitter, really to share educational articles and information. It's a good news source for me when it's used properly. But it's a great way to engage students. I've had people have hit me up on Instagram the last few weeks and said, hey, what's going on here with the college? And it's a way for me to interact directly with students. So that's another way. I plan on coming to a lot of events, a lot of games. I'm just excited. It's a big part of why we do what we do. My favorite day of the year, and our former president said the same thing, and I think it's probably true of most of us, is graduation day. It is so cool. It's actually two things. When we think about guided pathways, it's actually two things for me, and they both take place in this building. So the first one we haven't got to do in a while, and that's Eagle Days, is when we bring all of our high school students that are now becoming Golden Eagles, and at breakfast, they're a high school student, and then by lunchtime, they're a Golden Eagle, right? They're a college student with us. And they've started their college journey, and for many of them, they're first generation. They're the first one in their family to go to college. And I love that day. We've got 300, 400, 500 high school students here that are becoming college students and really achieving a dream for themselves. And it's a pretty amazing day. It's a hard day. Eva's shaking her head because it's a hard day for all of us, but a great day, right? So there's that excitement. And then 2 years later, if we do our job, right? If we do our job and get them on a 2-year pathway and get them scheduled the way that we should, 2 years later, there's a stage right there, right? And they get their name called out and they walk across the stage, and this place is at capacity, which I think is about 2,800, and sometimes even maybe a little bit over that. And it's balloons, and it's families, and it's tears, and it's joy, and that feeds me. I mean, that day alone, Eagle Days, and then graduation day, that feeds me and it drives me, and I think all of us as Golden Eagles to do what we do. It's what it's about, right? We've just given those students an opportunity now to take that next step. And so, I'm very student focused. I'm hoping when the masks go away and we're able to interact a lot more freely, that we'll do a lot more events. We had talked, even right before the pandemic, when it hit in March, we were planning an event in May for the community where we're going to have live bands and food trucks and just do like a big community day just to kind of say thank you. And then the world changed, but lots more of that hopefully in the future.
That concludes our forum. Thank you, Mr. Preston. Please give him a hand. Where? Don't go anywhere. I was asleep at the wheel. We need to give Mr. Preston a chance for some concluding remarks. Thank you.
So I'll be brief because some of you guys already headed out the door and it's almost 5 o'clock, which means technically you don't have to be here. So I want to close by saying thank you, first of all, to the committee, Dr. Llewellyn, and my fellow finalists. I was excited when the list came out. I know Dr. Zella very well. She's a DPI in our region, so we work together quite a bit. She's fantastic. Dr. Robinson, I've heard speak a couple of times, and she's a dynamic speaker. So I'm just excited to see that we have 3 strong finalists for the president position. Personally, if you guys know me, I'm a person of faith and family, and I feel blessed to even be in this position. And I'm grateful for the opportunity just to be part of this interview process. And I've really been grateful for the opportunity to lead our college the last 5 months. I think the 27 years I have of education and experience have uniquely prepared me for this position. I was walking over here earlier and I walked by Portable 506. And if you don't know the history of our campus, all the portables where we have our high school students now, that used to be Lemoore campus. And it was on the other side of the freeway. And so in 2003, we built our college, a couple of buildings, 3 buildings to start off with, and they brought the portables over, and those portables became offices. So for the first 4 years, I was in Portable 506, and it was one of the greatest learning experiences, and it really taught me what this college was about. Portable 506 was the home of 2 faculty, 3 secretaries, our maintenance operations department, Upward Bound, a couple categorical programs. It was just a great mix, and I learned a lot. And at that time, if you'd have told me that I'd be applying for and hopefully becoming the next, president of West Hills College Lemoore, I would have said, what are you talking about? Because that's never been a goal for me. Becoming a dean wasn't a goal. Becoming a VP wasn't a goal. For me, it's always just been listening, learning, leading, innovating, caring, working hard, and then doors have opened. And sometimes those doors have opened and it's not the right time and it's not the right season. And I don't walk through them, and other times it's been the right time and it's been the right season, and I'm ready to walk through, and this door at this time feels like the right time and the right season for me. It sounds cheesy, but 27 years ago I went into education to make a difference, and that same purpose drives me today, each and every day. I can honestly tell you there's not a day that I have quote-unquote worked, because it doesn't feel like work. There's not a day that I haven't looked forward to going in, not a day that I haven't, I've never dreaded coming in. There's been days I know are going to be hard and challenging and difficult, but I love what I do, and I wish that for our young people, I wish that for our students, that more than anything else, they'll find something with passion and purpose, because when you do that, it doesn't feel like a job, right? And then obviously, maybe not obviously, but success comes from that because you're living in your purpose, you're living in your passion. And community college, we have a really unique opportunity to do that. We serve all students, we serve our community, and we literally have the ability each day to change the trajectory of the lives of our students. And it might just be a conversation, it might be a concept you teach in class, it might be something that you do out on an athletic field, but we literally have the opportunity every day to make a difference in the community college system. I guess I'd close by just the things that I know. I know I'm committed to giving 100%. I'm leading by example. I know I'm committed to listening, learning, leading, and serving. I know I'm committed to high quality teaching and learning and high quality support services. I know I'm committed to being in the Central Valley and serving our students, specifically South Valley, and letting everybody know that South Valley is more than just Visalia. There's more to it, and we're a big part of that. I know that our college has a relentless pursuit of student success at its core. I know that together, our Gold Eagle team can continue to make a difference. I know that I'm really grateful to our community for letting me have this opportunity the past 5 months. And I know that I'm excited for the next step, whatever that decision is. We have an unbelievable college here. And sometimes you have to go away to know that. I think many of you have had the experience where you go to a conference or you go to an event or you go somewhere else and you realize that what we have here is something pretty special. And it really comes down to we put students first, and we care about each other. It's more like a family. And so I'm just grateful, and I'm humbled, and yeah, I'm really grateful for the students for hanging out today too. Even the Travis Scott shirt, I like that, so it's good.
Not Travis Scott.
All right, thank you guys, I appreciate it.